How a planet creates its orbit. This video explains how a planet creates its orbit by nothing but its own work. No forces are engaged, not any space-time attempts to interfere, no superior mind of any kind is supposed to take command. Instead, only mere matter is working. The planet moves due to its own abilities. We notice two strange hemispheres, blue and red, growing and diminishing. Both stick together and are apparently captured inside a bigger sphere. How might stars provide yellow cages, traveling along with them? For the sake of reason, our mental work should be able to copy material work. So let us give it a try. To keep stable, like any body, a planet must absorb and emit. New content has to be taken inside, old content has to leave. Even if only accepted as radiation, what comes to stay will become content, and also unavoidably what goes for good has been content before. I suggest, without this work of maintenance, no substance can survive, being surrounded by endless coming and going. No, we cannot help this, because it needs no help at all. Every existent substance is a working unit, a solid body working for nothing but real existence. Luckily, a unit's hard work is hidden inside, but it will gracefully appear as its movement outside. To absorb new content means to approach the spring of supply. The distance shrinks because the nourishing cloud gets partially soaked up and certainly gets digested afterwards. Gravity is not any pulling force of some heavenly predator. Instead, it is only a measure of the newcomer's appetite, at least in relation to the offered supply. How about the really doubtful, yet quite odorless contrary? To omit old content means to substantially cure a bad state of affairs. Not every donation seems to be welcome, so it gets donated again after being properly treated. In regard of movement, this remarkable work means to leave a harmful surrounding. While the selfish actor is leaving, his selfless donation is left behind. This quite common behavior might be interpreted as a quiet kind of separation. The distance grows while the density of the separating clouds increases. I think the most common and most ignored abilities, namely of absorption and emission, are completely sufficient to create an elliptic orbit. To prove this indignation of traditional wisdom, we make absorption and emission visible by the means of animated graphics. To realize what we see, we will now take a closer look on several phases of the planet's movement, which in truth are recording steps of its work. The entry. The yellow supply area is generated by the star in the middle. It is a cloud of light, heat or radiation offered to any intruder, but also ignorant of all of them. The cloud itself has no border, but will spread until it gets absorbed by colder clouds or dying stars. Only the effectiveness of the supply has a border, crucial to the intruder. This border might be called isothermality. Outside this border, the supply is too weak to make any change in the intruder's work. The range of the planet's absorption is shown as the blue hemisphere, while the red hemisphere marks the according range of emission. The two hemispheres unite to the planet's working area that will grow or shrink according to the amount of work. But both hemispheres will ever be generated in the same size, as long as the planet works successfully to stay solid, the same body or unit. Taking and giving must equalize each other. As long as the supply is insufficient, the planet will increase its absorption. Thus it will further approach. We usually call this behavior gravity, but we will wrongly accuse the source of supply to pull somehow in the distance. Instead, the approach is only caused by the work of the intruder, provided that the new supply is useful for his maintenance. When the supply becomes too hot or too intensive, the planet flees by the means of emission. The planet adapts its distance from the source of supply until its work succeeds. Finally, at the shown entry, the supply meets the demands. Here the orbit will start as the way of stable maintenance. From now on, the planet will renew itself, will exchange its own matter. Since substantial renewal is both the reason and the goal of work, it is the true and only creator of the planet's orbit. While absorption will take the lead and creates the next goal of movement, emission will create the latest reason or the ever-fresh start of movement. Next position. We see the planet has advanced a bit. Because absorption and emission mutually equalize each other, both hemispheres keep arising to the same extent. The empty focus 2 will turn out to be the pivot of all the blue and red hemispheres. No work is done here. The work of absorption and emission can only turn and change in this area of rest. Now we shall become aware of a very remarkable circumstance. Once the cloud of supply is given, the star's position is no longer decisive for the work of the planet. Instead, the planet follows the increasing density of supply without noticing the source after all. Not any kind of direct interaction occurs between spring and receiver. Both units are only engaged in their own respective work of existence. While the star works to create its own orbit, the intruder adapts its work of maintenance inside the relatively stable cloud of supply. This way an intruder rides along with the star. The planet will not leave the supply area, but will further consume it. That makes the yellow cage. The perihale. Here the planet has produced its closest distance to the star. The perihale is created by the biggest amount of work. Now absorption and emission reach from focus 2 to the border of effective supply to the isothermality. Meanwhile, the planet has renewed most of its subatomic content. From now on, it will increase its distance to the Sun to cool down again, which is to work and move slower. The further flight is achieved by emitting against the denser clouds of supply, while absorption is done in the cloud's poorer parts. Again, the position of the Sun will stay completely ignored. The exit. At the exit, the planet's work is opposite to the work at the entry. Here the planet could leave the orbit if the new supply proved to be unsuitable for further maintenance, or the orbit might become reduced or increased. We notice that at least half of an orbit is necessary to judge a recently intruded cloud of supply. Earlier, the work can neither stop nor change sufficiently. The further movement is now created in the opposite direction because absorption and emission have changed their position. But still absorption stays ahead and emission follows behind, as soon as the donation is ready to be set free. Next position. Here we pick a position near the biggest distance from the Sun. The planet has decreased its work, so it will move slower. Emission has turned against the dense area of supply and against the Sun as well. Absorption is achieved out of colder, more meager parts of the cloud. Next position. The planet has left the uphill and approaches the entry again. It uses denser regions of supply and turns its absorption more towards the center of supply again. The ellipse. At this point we ask why the planet's work should shape an elliptic orbit. The simple reason is that the working area always stays a sphere, in spite of its changing size. This way, two decisive distances will stay equal in each respective working step. We see radius 1 is highlighted within the working area, while another radius 2 is highlighted without the respective working area. It is evident that each radius is given along with the sphere of the working area. In geometry, an ellipse is defined as the sum of all points that keep the same distance to an outer circle and to an inner point as well. The requested point is focus 2, and the desired circle is the isothermality. Both regions mark the end of the planet's work. The elliptic orbit is shaped by the planet's work, which spreads equally from one end to the other. This way, it also becomes evident that absorption and emission spread equally all over the planet's molecules and atoms. The work on the surface can only change constantly if all inner parts change their work accordingly. Work will grow both in intensity and frequency when the mutual distance of the partners shrinks, but no atom will refuse its contribution for the sake of existence. Substance is a matter of working together. Existence is a question of collaboration. Reality is to be made, to become true. Taking and giving must equalize each other to provide mere being, as well as getting ahead. I think we can learn quite a lot from dumb, thoughtless matter. Yours sincerely, Gottlieb Tverdi.